everybody, and welcome to the YouTube Model Builders January the 3rd. This is the Arduino for model railroading. I kind of changed the name, Chris. Sorry about that, not telling you beforehand, but I was doing this in a big hurry. So anyway, you can deduct my pay after the show. But, well, go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you can check the schedules for the Tuesday, Wednesday shows. And those shows are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern time. And the Thursday night show, which is once a week, that's going to be at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern time. So be sure to check the schedule so that don't miss a show. But hey, if you do miss the show because you had to work or didn't check the schedule, shame on you. That's okay. We record the shows, and you'll find those on YouTube under YouTube Model Builders. While you're there at YouTubeModelBuilders.com, be sure and click on the eMag. There you can sign up for an email notification. We got a new issue coming out sometime about middle of January or so. I quite honestly don't know what it is, but I got word that JD was spending some of the holidays down in Kentucky, and he got snowed in and couldn't get out for about 2 days or so. So when he got home, he's having to play catch up. So anyway, here's Chris with tonight's show once I get back over here to my control room, and we'll let Chris have it. By the way, anybody on the panel wants to come in and join on the panel, you can. Be glad to have you. It's appear.in/YTMB live, LIVE. All right, Chris, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Johnny. As far as that paycheck deduction goes, you're always allowed one mistake. I've actually put in to have them double your salary for this year, and for everybody else, all I can say is Happy New Year's. Give you a little bumps there. Haven't seen most of you guys since last year. I mean, it's a long time. Actually, 3 days, but anyways, welcome back to the Arduino show again, and today I've got something in store for you. It was an actual project that I've finally done for my model railroad. I talked about it a little bit last week or last show, and what I did was I'm using an Arduino to servo control a turnout and the signal lights that go with it, just to show whether you should stop because you're going to run the points or green to let you go through. So no further ado, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and just take you over and show you that. So first I'll show you the setup, and then we'll go through the code. Pardon my camera for a second here. I kind of had to rearrange my entire workshop, so you're seeing a little, different view when I was sitting there from what you usually did, but I had to get the computer over here so I can actually look at what I'm doing. And give me 1 second, I've got to make an adjustment quick to the monitor. So there we go. I'll put it where I can see it while I'm showing you this stuff. Otherwise, I have no idea what the camera would be showing it. So here's the basic setup. It's still in breadboard state, but it is all hooked up and working on the layout. I just recently ordered some breadboard so I can actually make up a circuit board for all of this. But what it is, it's an Arduino Nano with a little board that I bought that allows you to plug the Nano in, and then it gives you all screw terminal connectors to connect your wires to. If you look on the back side, you see those are all just screw terminal connected instead of soldered, which makes it really easy to switch them around. All these wires are for all the signals up on top, which I'll show you in a second. Over here, I just put in 2 push buttons. The green is for the straight ahead route, and the red is for the diverging route on the turnout. And also on that little breadboard, you'll see there's a couple resistors there. And then I just used my other breadboard here for now just for the power. I found an old computer power supply And right now I just have them wires just threaded together for now, but this will eventually, like I say, get put onto a breadboard circuit. I'll take you up top and show you what it actually is there's a turnout right here. And underneath that turnout, I have a servo driving it. And then I have on the facing point, which is the single leg of the turnout. On one end of your turnout, you always have one track, and on the other end, you have two tracks. So the two lights on this signal, the top light is for straight through, and the bottom light is for the diverging route. And it looks, at least on my monitor right now, it's kind of hard to tell the difference, but the top one is green because you go straight through on the straight through route. And then the red one, the lower one is red for the diverging route because obviously that one is not lined up for that right now. And as you can see farther down on this end of the turnout, I have two more signals. Let's see if I get that lined up. There we go. So you got the green. That one's for the main line here, going straight through. And then up over here, you have the red one. There again, that's the diverging route. So while it's sitting here looking at the diverging route red, I'll just go ahead and hit the red push button. What it's going to do is the turnout's going to move, and as you can see, that light just turned green. If I hit the button again, hit the green button, now the turnout went back to main line and that signal turned red. And of course, for the main line signal here, it's the same thing. Right now it's lined for the main, so it's green. If I hit the red button, it turns red because it's now lined against it. So that's just the whole reason I did this is because this turnout is actually, I'm going to put the camera at my eye level. As you can see, you can't, it's just above eye level, so you really can't see when you're standing on the ground unless you're taller than me which way that turnout is aligned. Let's see if here it is. So as I'm starting to have operating sessions, this allows my operators to know which way the turnout is thrown without having to get up on their tippy toes and take a peek. So let me fix up my camera for a second here. Get it lined up on the turnout, and I'll push the buttons for you one more time. So right now it's lined for the diverging route, so the top signal, which is for the straight through route, is red, and the lower one is green. And I line it back, and you see the lights switched. So I hit it, switches back. Now it's green for the diverging route, red for the straight route. And you can just go back and forth like that. So there again, the way I accomplish that is there's a bunch of temporary wiring under here. There's the LEDs in these signal lights are bipolar LEDs. They're the kind that have only two leads coming off them. And what they do is every time you switch the polarity, it goes from red to green. So it's actually two LEDs in one. Where one, as the polarity flows one way, it's green. When the polarity flows the other way, it's red. And as you'll see in a few minutes when we get to the sketch for this, that it actually takes two pins on an Arduino, just as same as if they were two individual LEDs. Because they really are. They're two individual LEDs. They just happen to be wired together in one single package. But in reality, it's two LEDs. So for this whole setup, it takes two for the top, two for the bottom, two for the one back here, and two more for the one back here. So it's a total of 8 LEDs. So I need 8 pins just for LEDs. And then I need a pin for the servo and 2 pins for the push buttons. So all in all, it really takes up the better part of the entire Arduino Nano just to operate the one turnout and the 8 LEDs. Of course, if you remember one of our shows way back when, when we use that, name escapes me right now, but it allows you to run all the way up to like 64 LEDs basically off of 1 or 2 pins. Dave, jump in and refresh me. What's that called again?
Yeah, I was trying to think of that myself. I can't. It's a yeah. It escapes me as well. If I think about it, I'll just jump in with it. Let me take a look.
All right. Or Greg, if you know, jump in and tell me. But I'm just having a senior moment here, you know. So I just turned another year older a couple weeks ago, and it's starting to show already. So, anyways, by using a certain chip, we're able to run a whole lot more LEDs off of just a couple pins. So if you really wanted to save the $2 or $3 for a nano that you would use for each turnout, you could go ahead and use one of those. So.
Chris, are you thinking of a Mux chip?
No. No. There's a name for it when you
multiplexer.
It is a multiplexer, but I don't know why I can't think of the name. It'll pop in my head later on after we hang up or something. We actually did an experiment. I know, Dave, you had one set up and working that one time. You like
yeah,
eight LEDs on one pin, but then you can daisy chain them, so do 8 more off of each 8.
Yeah, I even remember the name of the chip. It's a 74C585, I think.
Yeah, it's an H-bridge or something, but I don't know why I can't remember the name of the process, so to speak.
Let me take a look.
Let's not get too hung up on it, I guess. But anyway, so that's my setup. I only have this one switch set up right now, and like I said, the reason I did it was because it's kind of above eye level, and I want my operators not to be running the switch and putting cars on the floor. As you can see, it's fairly close to the edge, and I don't have any fascia there yet or anything. So it's working out well for me so far. So I thought it was not that difficult to do, and I'm more than willing to share my sketch with you, so you'll all be able to
shift register.
That's it, shift register. I knew there was a name for it. I just couldn't remember for some dumb reason. Hey, Andrew, welcome. How's everything down under?
There you go.
That's good. So, without any further ado, now that we saw the setup, I'm going to share my screen. And if you guys remember, I set up that website for the show, and I'll share that with you. Actually, and how to get there, it's sites.google.com/view/Arduino workshop. I'll leave this up for a few seconds while you look for it, and I'll just quickly switch. This is what you should end up finding when you get there. And I have some links on here, so I'll just leave this up for about 10 seconds and talk foolishly while I wait. But yeah, sure. I guess we got a question. Johnny, you want to jump in?
Yes, more of a comment from Lee. He said a tortoise does the same without all the work and the thinking involved, as far as switching lights and all.
Yep, and he's absolutely right. But coming from the part of Wisconsin that I come from, I was able to accomplish, discount the cost of the signals because you'd need that either system. But you take the cost of a tortoise and a servo or a decoder to run it. I guess you don't need a decoder, but you need the push buttons. I can still do this for less than half the price of a tortoise, even with the Arduino, I guess is the point. So some of us Wisconsinites are pretty cheap or frugal, whatever you want to call it. So that's the whole reason. But he's absolutely right. You can do that with a tortoise. I actually have 2 tortoises set up on my Helix. They don't have lights connected at the moment, but yeah, there's eight pins on a tortoise that allow you to. There's a DP-DT switch built in that would allow you to flip those signal lights just the same as what I'm doing without the Arduino. But if you look at the cost of a tortoise, $15 to $20. I've got
closer to 20 now.
Yeah,
that's
street price. They're over 20 on MSRP, but street price is depending on where you get them. They're close to 20, yeah. So I've got $3 into the Arduino, less than $1 into that terminal block adapter, and then, you know, just pennies into the push button and the LEDs and the resistors. And the servo was $2, so, you know, all in all, I've got less than $10 into that.
There's one other advantage is that it's going to be much easier to connect multiple together. If you had a source computer controlling it, you can address this particular controller or whatever, and you know, basically run a whole layout on them one at a time.
Yeah, as soon as I set up my JMRI/CMRI network, it'd be just 2 wires to run from Arduino to Arduino. Then I'll be able to actually control it through JMRI, which you could also do with a Tortoise if you buy a decoder at about $15 to $20. I think for about $25 you can get one that'll run 2 tortoises.
Yeah. Jim L is asking, what's the website again?
Oh, I'll bring it back up right now. It's
doing that. Yeah. My modular layout, I'm using Arduino's. Each Arduino is dedicated to one module, my turnouts and my signals. I just connect them all together using the IC square bus from a central control.
Yep.
So if one module goes down,
kind of breaking up, but I haven't
lost the whole layer.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun too. I mean, it's for some of us that just like playing around with this stuff. It's kind of fun to be able to accomplish that too. You know, just, you know, tortoises have been around a long time, and most of us that have been in model railroading a long time have spent plenty of time with them, and we know they're tried and true and bulletproof. But sometimes it's just fun to play around with something different like this too, and say, hey, I did that myself, instead of just opening a box and hooking it up, you know. So there's plus and minus in both directions. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the tortoise, don't get me wrong. I'm kind of cheap. If I can save $10 a turnout, I will. And I have fun doing it too, just with the Arduino stuff. So,
all right, bear with me here, Chris, because they've made a few changes on me here and up here. So, all right, whenever you get done with your screen share, let's see if your camera comes back.
Okay, hang on.
Well,
we're just got to do a little testing here. I'll stop sharing for a second. Let's see if my camera comes back up.
Yeah, I got you. It's just when you do a screen share, I'm going to have to re-image everything. That's okay.
Okay, so
all right,
is it all right?
Yeah, we're getting.
Is it all right if
James said?
Is it all right if I leave it on here?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen share, and that's probably where I'll be for quite a while. So, hey, welcome, Chris.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Same to you.
So, go back to my screen sharing, and on this page is basically just a quick description, and there's 3 links to what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go through the sketch first, and then we'll actually start building one similar to what I already have built, except I don't have any more bi-directional LEDs, and a lot of you guys probably don't have any, right, or not bi-directional, but bipolar. So we'll actually try and build one using just individual red and green LEDs. It'll be a simple modification of my sketch, but this link number 1, if you click on that, it's going to bring you to the online Arduino editor, IDE. You remember a couple shows back, we did a show on how to use this, and I've been using it quite a bit since then. It's pretty fun that way because I can easily share my sketches with you guys. Link number 2 takes you, I'm going to just click on it right now and show you. Because I used the bipolar or bicolor LEDs, I had to use add a library that wasn't in the Arduino IDE. So this page is going to explain to you how that does it, you know, what it does for you. You know, basically right here, the color codes, 1 is red, 2 is green, 3 is yellow. That's what I was most interested in. We'll come back to this later. And then the third hub is actually where to download that that bicolor LED library. So if you guys want to do that while I'm explaining other things, go ahead and click on this link. It'll take you to GitHub. And all you have to do is over here in this green box where it says clone or download, hit that green button and then say download zip and install the library like you would any other library. And if you need help, just post something up in the chat and we'll walk you through that. If you haven't done that before, for guys that have been using Arduino for a little while now, they know how to do that, load a new library. So the other thing you can do, if you scroll down the page farther, you'll see I actually embedded a thing with the code. This is the code right here, in case you ever want to just come back and look at it quick. But rather than trying to play around with it in here, just go ahead and click this link number 1, and it's going to bring you to, it should bring you into create.arduino website and bring up the code for you. And I'm going to try doing that once. Hopefully it doesn't screw anything up here, but there's a reason I want to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. It's just going to open another version. Okay. So this is a little different than the one I was showing you, but the neat part is way over here to the right, download sketch. You can actually download this right to your computer now and use it on your normal IDE if you want to, instead of playing around with it online. But otherwise it's right here online. And then if you click on this open in web editor, it'll take you back to this page where you can actually do editing on it and download it into your Arduino. I mean, this is the online version of the IDE. This is where I actually created this program. So this sketch is one of the first ones I really created basically from scratch by myself. I just took a few snippets of code, but they were heavily modified too. So kind of proud of this. I'm coming along with my Arduino now that I'm able to, write all this code and get all that to work. So what we can do is go ahead and I'm going to go through this sketch for you and kind of explain to you what was going on. Since I already showed you the turnout operating and the signal lights, it'll make more sense now to go through the code because you'll have something to relate it to. So there we go. Get rid of that. All right. So up at the top here is just kind of a description. It just controls a railroad turnout with a servo and controls the LED signals for each leg of the turnout. The servo speed and the throw angles are adjustable. That's important because depending on where you mount your servo, you're going to need to put in a little different angles, as you'll see very shortly. And then it just tells you that it controls, I have it set up for searchlight signals, but you can also modify this quite easily to do any other, like a color light signal. It's just a matter of how you wire the LEDs. I mean, right now my LEDs are 2 LEDs in one package, where you would just have 2 separate LEDs if you had or even 3 if you wanted to add a yellow for a color light. So starting at the top here, the first thing we do is load our libraries, and we need the servo library because we're using a servo. And then here's that bicolor LED library that I was showing you back on this page. So you'll need to download that, as we showed you a minute ago, and make sure you have that available in order for this to run when you're done. These first 2 variables are straight and divergent. That's the angle or the throw of the servo. So by changing this number, it'll change how far left or right, depending on how you have it mounted, that your servo throws. So if it's throwing too far or not far enough, change that number. And same thing here on the divergent. For the diverging route, you want to, which is the route that branches off from the main line. The way it works is there's basically 180 degrees in a servo, and 90 degrees would be centered. So when I mounted my servo, I mounted it as close to center as I could, but of course I wasn't perfect by any means, you know, and so the higher number goes one direction from 90 degrees. The lower, any number lower than 90 degrees goes the opposite direction. So think of 90 degrees as your zero, and anything higher than that goes to the right, so to speak, and anything lower than that would go to the left. So I was somewhat close to the middle. I mean, I was only 96 versus 80, so I was off by about 2 degrees, but I was actually pretty close to having that thing centered. But don't be surprised if yours is like, it could be a much bigger number, and you may even have to go higher than 90 on this one. If they might both be higher than 90 if you're really far off of center. But the point being is, you know, watch which direction it moves and change this number accordingly if it's moving too far or not far enough. So you just have to play around with it till you're finding just the right amount of tension. So the other these are constant variables. They don't change throughout the program. They'll always, once it reads them in, it keeps them that way. So button pin 1 is the green button I showed you for the straight route, and button pin 2 is the red button I was using for the diverging route. And then pin 12 is used for the servo pin. So the button pin 1 is on pin 10 of your Arduino, button pin 2 is on pin 11, and servo pin is on 12. So when we get to wiring it up, those are the pins on the Arduino. We'll be wiring those too. Here's the other thing I built in was the step delay. That's actually the speed of how fast or slow the servo moves. Right now I have it in 10 milliseconds. And notice I put up here servo movement step delay in milliseconds. So I have mine moving really fast right now just because I wanted to, when I was playing around with it, that's where I left it. But you could set this way up to like 200 or 300, and the thing, depending on the quality of the servo, should move fairly slow and even smoothly. The really cheap servos won't move that smoothly, but they'll still move nice and slow. They'll just be a little jerkier. I had this, the only reason I had this all the way down to 10, which is pretty darn fast, was because something was binding up in there a little bit to the point where when I ran it slower, it would not throw all the way. So I just sped it up and then it was working good. So you can change this number though, to whatever you want it to be. Find a speed that works good for you. Just keep changing the number and testing it and seeing how you like it, I guess. So the next thing you do is some of your standard setup things is you have to define your servo. So I just called it my servo. And then here's the one variable that I have is the position. Right now, when I first set it up, it goes to the straight position, or it starts out as being in the straight position. The other option is diverge. I think I call it diverging, or we'll find out when we get down here later, I guess. But this position is a variable, so this value will change back and forth. As you'll see later on when we get down in the sketch, every time it moves one way, it rewrites that to a different value. And you'll see why. We'll get to there. But for now, we're starting out POS, stands for position, not the other POS, is straight. These bicolor variables are defined in the library, except that you can put in the values. So it's this bicolor LED is a command from the bicolor LED library. And I basically named my LEDs and my signal lights. If you look at the first two, it says main trail and side trail, and the next two says face straight and face diverge. Well, the single, when you look at the turnout, one side of the turnout has a single track and the other side has 2 tracks. Well, the side with the single track is the facing point. So I called that facing straight, so that when you're coming in on that single leg, and if you're going to go straight through and stay on the main, that's facing straight. If the turnout is thrown so that as you're coming into the turnout, you take the diverging route, that's the facing diverge. So on that signal I showed you that had two targets on it, the upper target is this face straight, and the lower target was the face diverge. The other two single signals that are on the two legs were the main line trailing point, so the main trail LED, and the one on the diverging route or the siding was called the side trail. So it's just names I made up. That made sense to me, but you can call them whatever you want if you got something that makes more sense to me. But when I read this, this tells me that this one is the single signal that's on the main line as you come into the turnout from the side that has two tracks. This is the one on the siding as you're coming into the turnout. This is the one if you're coming into the turnout from the single track side, that's for going straight through, and this one is if you were diverging. So the other thing to note is that there's two pins defined for each one of these. That's because we're using a bicolor LED, as I explained earlier. So this one is using pin 2 and 3 for the red and the green in the single LED. This one's using pins 4 and 5 for that single LED that's got two colors in it, et cetera, 6 and 7, 8 and 9. So if we scroll back up a little, you'll see I'm now using pin 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So those are all the pins I need to run all the 8 LEDs and the servo and the 2 push buttons. So now we've got everything defined. Now we go to the void setup, which we all know when you first turn on your Arduino or anytime you hit the reset button, it runs through the void setup once, and then it goes to the void loop. So what we have it do when we first turn it on is we're defining. You guys remember the built-in LED on your Arduino board, the pin 13? I'm actually using that because of the way I had that sitting down on the benchwork below the thing. When I push the button, if I walk up and look at the Arduino, I can tell you which position it's in because I'm using this LED built in. It lights up when I'm in the diverging route because the red matches the red push button. So if that light is out, I'll know it's currently green. I don't have to look up at the signals. I can just walk up to the board, and when I'm ready to push it, I know whether I need to push it or not, because if the red is on, that means the red push button is activated last. So just a little something extra I threw in there. So we're defining the LED built in as an output. We're defining button pin 1 as an input with pull-up, so I don't need to add a pull-up resistor. I'm adding button pin 2 as an input with a pull-up. Then we have to attach the servo. If you guys remember from our servo experiments a while ago, it's one thing to just define the servo up here. All we did was really name the servo, but you have to attach the servo, so to speak, to make it active and run. So what this says is my servo attached to servo pin. Well, we defined servo pin, or did we? Yeah, up here, servo pin equals pin 12. So this is just telling you attach the servo to pin 12. That's what this servo pin is just an alias for pin 12. And then it's going ahead and telling that servo to actually move. So it's saying my servo right straight. So remember POS up here? POS equals straight. Excuse me. So rather than putting a value in here telling it where to move, we just know that it's going to be straight. And if you look further up here, what is straight? Straight is equal to 96. So every time I call out straight, it's really moving it to position 96 in the servo. So going back to this one more time, we're attached the servo, and then we're telling it to go to position 96, or straight ahead. The neat part about this, by using straight instead of an actual number, is anytime I need to adjust my servo, I just change it once here and every time it calls out straight in the rest of the code, it always refers back to that value. Otherwise, I'd have to change it everywhere in the sketch if I use just the straight up number. So it's really handy to do it that way. So once we attach it and tell it to move, I put a delay of 3 seconds in here, or 3,000 milliseconds. And the only reason I did that was because I'm having the servo detach after it's done moving. If you've ever seen a servo sit there and make a noise, it moves to a position and sits there and chatters or makes a noise. You can stop that with an Arduino by detaching it, or basically turning it off. So attaching it is like turning it on, and detaching is like turning it off. So I'm turning it on, I'm moving it, I'm adding a 3-second delay to allow it to finish moving, and then I'm turning it off. So it doesn't sit there and chatter or make a noise. And that concept will be repeated down when we get down into the void loop section. But remember, this is a one-time run. All this is really doing is when I turn on the Arduino, it's going to automatically align me to the straight ahead position. That's all I'm telling it to do. And once it does that, then it goes in and actually sets the colors of the LED. Because it's in the straight ahead position, I want the 2 mainline signals to be green, and I want the diverging route signals to be red. So that's what this little section does. So main trail LED set color to 2. Main LED drive, that means turn it on. So first we're telling it what color it should be, and then we're telling it to turn on. Then we do the same thing with the side trail. Set LED color to 1, and then turn it on. And those comments here tell you basically that, so you don't have to try and remember all this. I commented the heck out of this sketch to help you guys along when you come back and look at it later. Same thing for the other LEDs now. The facing straight, turn it on to 2. Now, going back, you know, it's the same thing as for the rest of these. You're setting the color and then you're turning them on. So here's all 4 of them get turned on, or get their color assigned and then get turned on. So what, if I go back to my web page and click now on this link number 2, this is what I was showing you before. It didn't make a lot of sense to you because you didn't know where I was going with this, but now it will. If you scroll down on this page, color codes. 0 is off, 1 is red, 2 is green, and 3 is yellow. So now when you look at my sketch, okay, 2 is green, 1 was red. So this one's going to be green, that one's going to be red, that's going to be green, and that's going to be red. So that's why I put that link in there, so you can go back to this page and read all about the library and what it does for your LEDs, but mainly so that you know what the color codes were. If you want to play around with yellow, you're going to have to do some modifications to my sketch. I did have it working, but I didn't see any value in it. There's a key thing that you have to read, which is just scroll down a little from the color codes if you want to add a yellow. It says right here, if you're using yellow, color 3, or blinking, you need to call LED drive at least every 9 milliseconds so that the library can alternate the colors without the flickering being obvious. This means if you use a delay, the LED will freeze in one color until the delay finishes. So what that basically tells you is you have to keep, and I had to do this, you had to keep adding this LED drive command in there just about every couple lines of code just to keep that thing flashing yellow, at least within the section in the void loop that we'll get to in a minute. And you can't use the delay. And remember, I wanted to use the delay so I could turn my servo off. I couldn't just go immediately into detach because it would detach it before it finished moving, because that thing, that Arduino processor works so darn fast that it just executes the commands at, you know, hundreds of them a second. So I had to add the 3-second delay in order to allow the servo to finish moving. Well, by doing that, I can't add this 9 milliseconds or, have it turn on that yellow LED again every 9 milliseconds. So it was one or the other, and I chose just to delete the yellow, which I really didn't have a use for anyways.
Hey, Chris, there are
Yes.
ways that you can fix that by
Use the millis command.
Yeah, by using a millis command, you basically take what time it is right now, and then keep watching that as you're going through the loop. And when you hit 3 seconds worth of time being added to that millis, then you can go and take a step out of and turn that thing off. But that would be what's called a non-blocking delay, where you can delay things for, after a certain amount of time, it'll just execute without blocking the rest of the things.
That's how I do my blinking LEDs in my turntable routine as well.
Okay. Well, if one of you guys, I know I have used it once or twice before, and because I realized, I really don't need yellow. Theoretically, I could be using yellow on the facing point light, the lower target. When in real life, when a switch aligns for a diverging route, most of the time they have it yellow, not green, because they still want you to go through at a restricted speed. So the top light would be red, obviously, because you're not going straight through. But the lower light, instead of being green, could be yellow. But it would. I thought about doing that and then playing with the millis command, but I just wanted to get this done, and I went ahead and just, I experimented around with a little bit, but I just didn't want to spend any more time on it. So I did think about using the millis, and I just opted not to, because it would have took me more experimenting, because I've only used it once before. But yeah, that's great that you pointed that out for everybody, because that is an option. If you are familiar with the millis command and how to use it, you could actually have your cake and eat it too. You could have the servo detach and still use your yellow light.
I think I'll go through that with you at a later date, and maybe you can update this.
Maybe I'll even let you do part of a show on how to use it, or I'll do a little workup on using it, because it is a way to use a delay without actually using a delay, because the real delay command literally stops all program functions for that amount of time, where the millis is, like you said, it's a counter. It's a start now, and then it allows all those other commands to keep functioning until the point when it hits a certain time that you defined, and then it'll execute some other command like stopping or turning off the turnout. So
yeah, I actually built a class object called a timer class, where you could say, well, I want this timer to run for 3 seconds, and you start the timer now, and then as long as you just continue to call the timer, when your 3 seconds is up, your timer will respond back, and then you can execute your function at the end of the timer to turn it off.
I was just looking too, right underneath what I was showing you, where it says blinking. It says you can make the library alternate between two commands, and here they are actually using the milliseconds, or in milliseconds. Never mind. I thought I saw millis there for a second, but anyhow,
I wrote a library that you know how you're doing your servo, Chris, where the step like a tortoise would. I wrote a library that does that for you, that uses the milliseconds versus the delay. So basically, you could create 4 objects of the servo for that library. The library just includes the servo. You tell it where you want the straight to be, the diverge to be. It keeps track of where it's at, and it just puts the servo where it needs to go, and steps it along the way using milliseconds.
There was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I haven't released that yet because I wanted to make sure the bugs were worked out of it first or make sure there was no bugs before I put it on GitHub or anything.
Oh, cool. Once you get it done, let me know, and maybe we'll take a little look at it too on the show. I mean, one of my goals for this year is letting you guys show off some of the stuff you're doing too. So if you have anything, just contact me offline, and we'll get you on a show. I'd love to help you guys show off some of your work. So like we had Greg with his turntable, and I guess Lloyd is working up something pretty cool Johnny was telling me about, so I'm going to have to get a hold of him. I don't know if he's out on YouTube right now or not, but if you are, Lloyd, I want to see what you're working on. Sounds pretty cool. I won't spill the beans yet, but I think a lot of you guys that are on every night probably know what he's doing. But Johnny was telling me about it, and I don't want to butcher it, so I won't even try and describe, but we'll see if we can get him on here when he's either done or comfortable enough to share it with us. So I don't know, was that for everybody to hear? If not, Johnny just said my finger's on the mute button. So I'm laughing. He talks in our ear sometimes that you guys can't hear it, but he keeps us.
Yeah, he pretends to be God.
He keeps us entertained while we're talking. A lot of times, if I'm sitting here just looking at the screen like a dummy and not saying anything, it's because I'm listening to Johnny. Anyhow, there was one benefit to the delay rather than the millets, and that was if you see the delay and then the detach, and then we get into turning the signals. So the one thing I did realize was that my lights won't change color until the switch has actually completed its throw. So, for what that's worth in technical terms, those couple of seconds, if you don't want your signal, lights turning color before the switch is done throwing, that delay. But there again, you could use the millis to accomplish that too. So, but it was a quick and easy way for me to move the turnout and then change my signal lights. So, okay, so that was the void setup. So this just runs once and basically presets my layout to being straight ahead and the lights matching the correct positions. Then we get to the void loop. This is where the program runs over and over and over forever, or until you turn it off, whichever comes first. So what I'm going to do is skip over at a high level through a couple parts of this, and then I'm going to jump back down and get into the details. So this void loop is basically three major sections. The first major section is it's reading the state of the buttons. Are the buttons pushed or are they not? The next major section is what to do if one of the buttons is pushed, and the other major section is what to do if the other button is pushed. So basically all this thing is doing is reading the buttons. If nothing changed, it reads the buttons, and it just keeps reading the buttons over and over and over until something changes. Because section 2 and section 3 are if commands, so they won't do anything until a certain set of conditions are met. Basically meaning, is button 1 been pushed or has button 2 been pushed? So we start out reading button 1 state. Digital read the input of button 1. Digital read the button for button 2. Then it says if button 1 has been pressed, or in other words reads low, then move the servo to the straight ahead position. If it hasn't been pressed, it's going to skip down here and check to see if this condition is true. If button 2 has been pressed, meaning it's low now or grounded, then it'll do this. So it'll read the button states, check if this one was pressed, check if that one was pressed. If not, it reads the button states, checks this one was pressed, checks if that one's pressed. So over and over and over. Once you finally do press a button, let's pretend we pressed button number 1 for straight ahead, then it's going to run this if routine right here. And this if routine is basically the same as what I did up here, except it's to make sure it's aligned for straight ahead. If button 2 has been pushed instead of button 1, it's basically another copy of that same routine, but it just throws the servo the other way and changes the color lights to different colors. So let's go back and just dive into button 1 setting for a second. So if button state 1 equals low, then digital write the LED built into low. So that was that little built on the board LED that I was telling you about before. It'll turn it off. So if that is off, I know I could just look at the Arduino and know which button was pushed just by the state of that LED. So just a little extra something I added in here. This line of code, I was looking at this again last night. I think this is just a legacy piece of nothing code that I can probably remove. I didn't have time to remove it and retest it, but I'm guessing I could comment this out or just delete it altogether. I don't think it has anything to do with, I think I just forgot to pull that out when I was testing different things. So ignore this line right there. So we're digitally writing the built-in LED to low. Then we're attaching or turning on the servo. And then it's doing a for loop, which basically moves the servo. So what it's saying is if I equals position, or the integer I equals position, and if I is less than straight, then move it. So just to break that down, you're probably thinking, what the heck did he just say? So I is a variable. So I equals position, or POS. So remember, POS was our little variable up here. So POS could be straight or it could be diverging. If it's straight, it's going to equal 96 in my case. Or if you change it, it'll be whatever number you change it to. If it's divergent, it would be 80. So going back down here to make a little more sense of that, I equals position. In other words, I equals whatever the current value of position is. In this case, it's straight, because we defined that right up here. Digital, or a little farther here. Initial setup is straight and nothing has changed. We'll assume we just turned the Arduino on and nothing has changed yet. Never pushed any buttons. So now the next statement says if I is less than straight, then I++, which basically tells it to move one step at a time. So going back and starting to put this together a little more, trying to keep this simple and understandable, but it's a little more nebulous than other things. If position right now equals 96 and straight equals 96, well, if we had previously set this turnout to the diverging state, in other words, we had pressed 2 sometime before we got to pressing 1 again, position would not equal 96, it would equal 80. So what this is saying is if 80 is less than straight or 96, then move the turnout. If it's already 96, it would be equal, so it's not going to move. If that makes sense. So you're comparing the current position to 96. If the current position is not 96, if it's less than that, it's going to move. If it's the same, it's not going to move. So assuming it was moved, it's going to say write I. Well, I is I++, which means it's going to move it one step at a time until it gets to 96. So here, this step delay is the speed that it's going to move. So here we're comparing values. If it needs to move, it's going to say write, and it's going to start moving. And then this delay is going to tell it how fast to move. So that was that other variable that we defined way at the top here. Step delay equals 10. So whatever number you had up here, this is controlling that speed down here. So we're attaching the servo, we're comparing the values. If they're not equal, it's going to move, and the delay tells it how fast to move. And once it's done moving, the next thing we do is we rewrite the position to equal straight. So regardless of what the position was before, we're now telling it to the new value of position is straight, or 96 in my case. Then we're going to set all the colors on our LEDs to match up correctly for what you want them to look at. 2 being green, 1 being red, 2 being green, 1 being red. So these are the same Same thing we looked at up here in the setup. It's actually identically the same because we originally set it up to be straight through. Then we have our delay to allow the servo to finish moving, and then we detach or turn the servo off. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell for if button 1 is pushed. So to go through that again real quick, if button state 1 is low or has been pushed, it's going to turn off this line's going to turn off the built-in LED on your Arduino. This line is garbage. Ignore it. This line tells you to turn on the servo. This line compares the values of the current value of straight, or the current value of position, I mean, to the value of straight. If they're not the same, it's going to turn on, it's going to start moving the servo at the speed of your step delay. Then it's going to rewrite the value of positions to equal straight. Then it's going to turn on all your LEDs to the appropriate colors. Then it delays 2 seconds and detaches or turns off the servo. Next thing it would do is just compare this to see if it's been pressed, which obviously it wouldn't, because this all takes place so quickly that you wouldn't have pushed the button again. Then it starts over at the top, reads the buttons. Now let's assume you pushed button 2. Well, this is almost a carbon copy of what we just went through, except that just a couple of the values changed. The LEDs swap colors, and there's just a little bit difference here. So now, here again, you can ignore this line. I could just delete it altogether. But the first line, it's going to turn on that red LED on your Arduino board. That signals just to me that my red button was, that's the current state, as the red button was the last one pushed. Because when you walk away and come back 5 minutes later, if you don't look up at your signal lights, you wouldn't know which way it's aligned. So, but then we get back right into the I equals position. Well, if the last time it was pushed, it was the number 1 button, we'll know that the value is straight, or 96. So if I is greater than divergent, or 80, then it's going to move. So we know that position is 96 because that was the last time we pushed the button, and we know that divergent is 80. So we know 96 is greater than 80. We know it's going to move. If you push the red button twice in a row, it wouldn't move because the value of position would be divergent. Because right down here we tell it that. We'll get to that in a second. So kind of jumping around here. I got to get back on track. So going back to here, we turn on the servo. We compare the values. If they're not equal, it's going to tell the servo to start moving. And once again, it's going to do it with the step delay. That's the speed of your servo. Here's another one that I forgot to get rid of, so ignore that one. That's garbage. And then this time it's going to tell POS that it now equals divergent, since that's the last thing that it did was move to the diverging route. So basically this POS is just a toggle to tell you what the last thing was. And it just allows you to, it allows the Arduino to know, hey, if it was in divergent before, then I have to move it to straight ahead when I push the straight ahead button. If it's already in straight ahead, I don't have to do anything. It's basically what it really boils down to. And then, like I said a minute ago, we just flip-flop the colors using these commands. We delay for 2 seconds, and then we turn the servo off. So that's basically just over and over doing the same thing.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
There's one thing I noticed in here. Normally, under normal circumstances, people try to debounce their buttons. But
Correct.
one of the advantages of putting that delay in there the way you did is you don't really need to debounce your button, because as soon as you press a button on the first hit, it's going to start this action, and it won't complete the action until you're done with at least 2 seconds worth of time, which your delay is, and that would consume the debouncing time. So you really don't even need to worry about debouncing your switch, because you're using a real delay in there as opposed to that millis command that we've talked about prior.
Ah, well, that makes sense, because I had considered the debounce if I needed it, but it hasn't turned out that I've needed it, and now I know why.
Yep, that's because you have the actual delay in there, which consumes all that time in there that the debouncing would have happened.
Well, I was thinking maybe having the pull-up, the internal pull-up too, gives it a solid ground and maybe prevents some of that bouncing too. But
I don't think that using the internal pull-up would prevent you from needing to use the debounce.
okay.
Routine.
And for those of you guys that maybe have joined us, just in the last couple shows, what the debounce that he's talking about is when you push a button, even though it feels like, okay, the second you push that button, you're making solid contact. In reality, as the contacts of the button are coming together, to put it as simple as I can, it's never a perfect on. Imagine a little electrons jumping up and down between the two contacts as they're getting really close together before they hit and stay pushed together. What I can do is I can literally bounce a button, because these processors work so fast that it would literally turn it on and off, 10, 20, 30, 50 times before you made solid contact, just in the act of pushing the button, no matter how fast or how hard or how quickly you push that button. It's a mechanical device, it's imperfect, and these processors work so fast that it'll literally read on and off like 50 times before it becomes solid on. So that debounce is a way to make that go away. The first time it notices it, it basically locks it in, so you don't get that bouncing effect. It's the same as if you were pushing a spongy button that really wasn't making total contact. So even though the button may seem good and may seem like it made solid contact, there's just a couple milliseconds where it's bouncing back and forth between on and off as it's making final contact. So if that makes sense to you guys, it's the best way I can explain it.
That's a good explanation.
So that's the sketch. Feel free to download this, butcher it, make it better, re-upload for all of us if you do. That's the beauty of using this online editor, is how quick and easy it is to share these sketches. And when you see this share button, if you go ahead and make this better and want to share it with us, just hit the share button, do this copy link, and send it to me in an email. And I'll be glad to post it on my website to share it with all the rest of them, rather than trying to use GitHub, which is a little more complicated than other ways. But, my email is simple. It's mrltrains@gmail.com. So we all know me as MRL Trains, so just do mrltrains@gmail. Send me an email, send me that link, and I'll test it out and get it posted up there. If you guys want to share anything with the group, more than happy to do that for you. But just hit this share button and copy link and send that to me, and that's the same thing I put on the web page right here. That's all that this is right here. Click that link and it jumps you right in. And the other neat thing was that you see this down here. That one was simply when you go to share, copy this iframe, and then embed it into your website that way. That's how I embedded that on my website. Was simply using that. So my page, I was actually able to embed. This is the exact same sketch we were just working on, but it's actually embedded on the website, so you could just copy and paste the whole thing. Sometimes I haven't actually tested it. I've had websites where I've tried to copy it out of here, and it's just a nightmare because it doesn't work right. But the other thing you can do is, rather than trying to copy and paste, there is a download button right here too. That's the one right on the website here. If you want to download the sketch, it's right here. Or if you want to open it in the Arduino editor, like like this one right here, just go ahead and hit this button right here that says open code. And that'll open up this Arduino editor and then be right back here just like I am. So only it'd be in your version, not in mine. So, how are we doing for time, Johnny? Okay. We got two choices. We can hang it up, or we could spend another half an hour building this thing real quick. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And what I'll probably do is we'll spend maybe 20 minutes, half hour next show building it. But I had something else I wanted to start goofing around with on the next show. And I will show you. Stop my screen sharing and show you that right now. Okay, stop sharing. I get to see my ugly mug again. So this is a joystick. We talked a couple shows ago when I was looking for things to do, and this was one of the things I kind of thought of. So go out there. If you don't have one of these already, this is what we're going to start playing around with next month. And what we'll do is we'll probably build this. We'll build the circuit for the sketch that we just did, and then I'll have something to start working on for this one. So I'm thinking this little joystick. This is just like a gaming from your gaming controllers, you know. But I was thinking of all kinds of little neat ways we could use this on a model railroad. You could use it for operating a gate or an overhead door on a building. Hint, hint. You could use it for throwing a turnout. You could maybe even use it for indexing a turntable, a cheap and simple turntable, not something nearly as elaborate as Greg's beautiful creation. But if you want to do it quick and dirty, there might be a way to do it. So I'm going to start looking into find out a project or two that we can do. So in the meantime, if you don't have one, they look like this. This button just pops on and off fairly easy, but go out on Amazon or eBay or your favorite Banggood or AliExpress, or even one of the Adafruit or, you know, one of the good US sites, and find yourself a joystick that looks like this. I'll hold it up one more time. There's no real writing on it. It looks like 5 pins on there. I'll try and get it out there on the light. And the back side just looks like this. I've seen them out there. I mean, it's a very common joystick. It's got, okay, there's some writing on, see if I can get it to focus. Okay. Ground 5 volt. I'll read them for you. Ground +5, VRX, VRY, and SW are the 5 pins labeled. So I'm thinking anyone that looks like this is probably going to function the same. It's just one of those cheap clones that they're all the same. So I'll look into it. If I find out that there are a bunch of different ones, I'll try and post in the next week or two, and maybe even put a notice up on Google Plus or on Facebook that to order something else. But this gives you a whole month to get one ordered. Even if you order it from China, you'll probably have it by then, because I've had pretty good luck. I mean, this is an unsoldered version of that. I ordered this off of eBay from a Chinese seller, and I had it in like 10 days. That's phenomenal. 10 or 12 days, something like that. It was a kit. It was just a printed circuit board. These were broken down into like sets of 3, and they just snapped together. And then there was the standoffs for, see if I can get a good angle there. You can see the header pin extensions that just allow it to sit up higher on the board. So that once you put these on, it's not in the way. But yeah, I ordered these nanos and these from 2 different Chinese buyers, and I got them both in less than 2 weeks from China. So I think a month should be pretty safe. If not, when you go on eBay, typically if you filter by US buyers, you can find the same exact stuff It's just usually a little more expensive, and then you'll always have it in a week or so.
Hey, Chris, I'm looking on Amazon right now and I see these joysticks. I did a search by Arduino joystick and they pop right up. Amazon, five pieces for $9.99.
Hey, there you go. If you need
With
more than
Prime,
one,
it's free shipping. Have it by the
okay,
middle of the week.
there you go. So that, as far as I know at this point in time, is I'll make sure that we don't need anything special besides that we haven't already used. And I'll get, if you watch the website again, bring that up. Watch my Arduino workshop website. I'll get something posted as soon as I know exactly what I'm doing. It might be 2 to 3 weeks from now. Things have been busy for me, but I'll get something posted as soon as I figure out exactly what I want to do with this and get a program worked up for it. Well, I'm not screen sharing, am I? That would help. Hang on. Many tabs open here. All right, so if you go back to this Arduino workshop website, I'll get this area up. Not screen sharing? It's telling me I am. It says stop sharing. That's probably on your end, huh? Dave, can you see my screen share?
Yeah, but I got the same. Yeah, I see the
okay.
same as you see, which is different than online.
Well, I'm just seeing. Anyways, okay. So I'll stop sharing and get back to sharing, swearing, whatever it is. All right. So with that, I'm going to bid you all a fair adieu. And if you have any questions, like usual, actually, let's take any questions or comments right now before we hang up. Anybody out on YouTube land got any questions or comments? If not, probably bored everybody to death, huh? Yeah, the sketches, that's kind of rough going through that, but it's what you got to learn if you want to be able to do this stuff. So next week we'll build and we'll stay away from boring sketches. So our next show.
No, I think it's very interesting just looking at that sketch.
So, all right, Johnny, close her up, and we'll see you guys in a month.
Alrighty.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate a good show there, Chris. That was interesting, being able to go through that sketch and see how you did that. Gave me some ideas there for what y'all are talking about on the alternating. That might be able to use for flashing caution lights, traffic lights, something like that. But anyhow, I appreciate everybody coming in on the chat over there. I want to say go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you can check on the schedules for the shows. The Tuesday and Wednesday shows are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The Thursday show, which is every Thursday of each week, is at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And also be sure to click on the eMag and sign up for an email notification. So when the eMag comes out, you'll be notified of it if JD doesn't get snowed in again. But anyway, Happy New Year to everyone. And we shall see you. Well, let me get the book out here and see what we got for the next show. Next week, January the 9th, we've got the Fine Scale Show. That's with Andy, Miles, and Ralph Renzetti. January 17th will be Into the Locomotive Shop with Joe. Big Bill's going to be hosting, Barry's IT, and January 23rd will be Weathering. So that's kind of the rundown on the schedule. The schedule for the first quarter of this year is already posted on the website, so you can go to the website and check schedule. So we shall see you tomorrow night for Johnny Small Train Talk Show. And then next week we'll see you January the 9th, which is a Tuesday, for the fine scale bill. All right, everyone, have a good night. And we'll see you later. Have a good weekend.